Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here. Saturday the 29th of June, and lovely weekend forecast, so we'll get out on the Rocket 3 this afternoon, but this morning we'll carry on from where we left off with the Fury Street Scrambler E35SS. And the last time, in the last video, we were making a mould of some of the rarer parts so we can get some patterns made up. And as you can see below me, there is the pink moulding tub, and I'll just get it set up here and we'll see how this has turned out. Right, so where we left off was that we just filled this margarine tub with the silicone goo that we'd mixed with the catalyst. In the bottom of this were lying three items from the Fury: the main stand stop, the cam chain tensioner mounting spacer, and also one of the bob weights from the Auto Advance unit. And I'm pleased to say that this has set nice and solid. So what we should be able to do is just break that away from the sides and peel it out. And as a test earlier on, as you remember, I with full approval, I hasten to add, I borrowed a kitchen measuring jug, glass, Pyrex, and I have managed to pull out the remnants of what was in there in one piece, including the very thin film on the side of the jar as well. And that's come out really well. Just one or two little tiny bits to finish off in the washing up. So hopefully the tub will do the same. So let's do that now. So just peel it away at the sides, out there, and there it goes. I suppose I could use a knife to go around this, but the reason we use these is they're so flexible that it should pop off the bottom if we get enough of the sides released. It is coming away from the bottom now. Yeah, here it comes. She's on the way. There we are. And there we are with the, you can just see the pieces in the bottom there, and they've maintained the separation. So what we have to do now is gently put one slice in these and peel these out. So I've got a standing knife handy, shielded of course. Take the shield off. Now I think the best technique, as I say, is just to put one slice across these and just prise them out. So with the main stand stop, then we place that in a position so it was lying on its back, and that's probably been a good strategy actually. So but what I'm going to do first, I think the bob weight's going to be the easiest. I'm going to do the Auto Advance bob weight first. So what we'll do is we'll just do one line through the centre of that. Put the shield back on the knife, and then we'll grab a screwdriver, probably something like an electrical screwdriver, and prise that out if we can. There it comes. one. Now the next one we'll do is the cam chain tensioner spacer. That's a little more intricate, but I think we'll go down the lines on each side and then down the centre in like an H, and we should be able to get that out. So there it is exposed, and in fact you can't see it very well there, but we just managed to start exposing it. But if you bend the mould, all of a sudden it starts to pop out. Now the only problem with that one is that we have filled the mounting hole. So I'm just going to slide the blade down one end, because we'll need to cut that cylinder to get it out. Like so. So let's just shield that again. There she comes. So she's out. The hollow cylinder that represents the hole, don't know if you can see that, has popped out, but all we've got to do is just put it back into position like so. That's it. And then finally, I think we'll just need one simple little slice down the middle for, just thinking about it, a simple slice down the middle for the main stand stop. And there we go. Let's just show you again how it's, I don't know if you can see that, but there, it's beginning to separate. Well, it's the first time I've used this stuff in anger, having watched a friend use it for the first time not long ago, and I've got to say I'm impressed. Proving to be a little more stubborn this one, but then because of the shape of it, it's quite deep in the mould. Let's have a bigger screwdriver to lever it. Something with a bit more of a surface area. There we go. Like that. And there she comes. Oh, I know what's holding the other end. Again, it's because there's the mounting hole. So we're going to need to slip a knife down it to cut that little cylinder that's formed, I think. Something like that. There we go. It's out, and you can see it's rather a strange shape, with two angle bends, and that's why it's been a bit stubborn coming out. Shield the knife again, but it's out. So there we are, one mould that could be sent off then to my friend. And just one final comment is that as I noticed, as this was curing, then bubbles were coming to the surface, and in fact, as it's cured, you probably won't be able to see this very well, there are what appear to be bubbles on the surface, but actually on the reverse side of the mould and most of the side as well, it's very clean and very compact. So I'm sure that's good enough. Good. Job done. So what we can do is I'll remount these 3 pieces, I'll put them back with the other components where they belong so we don't lose them, and then I'll bring you back and we'll start on the gearbox, on the crankcase itself. As we said last time, we're going to start on the back end of the gearbox, fit the bearings for the lay shaft. We'll also fit the quadrant spring mounting spacer, or mounting lock washer, which is very specific to this, which I'll show you, and then we can put the gearbox in, and then we can begin fitting up the inner and outer gearbox covers, which is where we've got the problem with the spacing, and we'll see where we lie there. So let me set that side of things up and make sure these parts we've released from the mould are stored away properly, and I'll bring you back. Okay, right, parts put away safely, and now we'll get on to doing some bits and pieces on the motor. The first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to remove the starter motor. That's fitted up okay, but I want to do some testing on this starter motor, and I might do that at some point with the Bendix gears at this end removed, to do some testing on it, because we have wired it up and got no response with a good battery, so it might need some internals cleaning. I have rebuilt this starter, and with components from various starters. They're pretty readily available, to be honest, so I've got 4 or 5 bits and pieces of the main starter motor, which I think is the well, obviously it's Lucas, but I think it's M3 starter motor, is it, which was common with other models, I believe. But the unique part to this is the main starter itself is not unique, but the mounting plate at this end is, and also the planetary gears at the remote end are as well. And it's those planetary gears that give it the torque to heave the motor over. So we'll just get these 2 mounting screws off, like so, and then we should, in theory, be able to just pull it out backwards, because at this end it's a tight sealed fit in this end, in the hole at this end, with an oil ring as well. So we should be, there it goes. We should be able to wiggle it backwards, I think. Let me just check the other end. Yep. Might have to tap it a little bit. There's not much room to play with, that's for sure. We just need to make sure that the motor's not going to rock forward too much. There she goes. There we go. And this is quite a weighty thing as well. This is bloody heavy. But you can see how it's machined at this end, and it's got an O-ring as well to seal it. But that's a bloody heavy unit. And what we'll do in the near future is say we'll take this planetary gear end, or Bendix gears, off. So we've got the bare motor, and we'll do a little bit of testing to make sure that spins okay, the brushes are clean, etc. Forgotten how heavy that was, so we'll put that to one side for the moment. And then we can spin the engine round, and that's a lot lighter already, to expose the gearbox case. And what we'll do actually is, because we're not going to be damaging anything on the drive side here, because there's nothing much mounted yet except the stator, and that's protected by studs, we'll lean it on its side, which will be a bit more stable, I think. Like so. So what I'll do now is let me just remove the phone. I'll show you this. So I'll just spin you around the other side and I'll bring you back. Okay, so there we are inside the case. So we've got here the main shaft bearing, which is in. Here goes the lay shaft bearing, which we've got to insert, which is a needle roller, blind ended. Here we've got the quadrant spring, and here you can see here are the two mounting bolts for that quadrant spring, but also there's this what appears to be a strange lock washer on top, and that's because that's been homemade just as a temporary addition, just to get the spacing right for the mounting bolts. I've actually found one of the originals, and that's because what I've done over the last few days is, obviously I've got the main motor components lying about ready to go back on, but that there is the tray of parts that I've put together from my stock of everything that we'll need to add in the first build, first fit of this motor, which is underway at the moment. And in here I've got another quadrant spring, but I've also got one of those special unique washers as well. So let me just dig that out and I'll show you. Okay, so here you are. There's a spare quadrant spring, and then there's the special mounting washer, which is a tab washer too. So these two holes are for the mounting bolts. This hole is for a peg to ensure that this stays in one position and doesn't spin like so off the quadrant. And then you can see with this tab stroke spacer, you've got locking tabs here for the bolts, and then you've got a raised pressing at this end which goes over the locking pin, and obviously that then retains the locking pin, so it doesn't actually come out as it's just sort of push fit into the case at the other end. So if we go back to what's installed, we'll remove that now and put the proper tab washer in, but also we'll check that the pin is underneath this end as well, which it should be, to stop this moving up and down and potentially dropping off the quadrant. I'm sure there is because it feels tight, but let's just check anyway. Okay, there you are with the one that was installed now removed with its temporary washer. There's the correct tab washer, and that's just a spare two mounting bolts. And the good news is that inside the gearbox, once I remove that, you can't quite see it very well in that spot there, there is a pin. It's there, so that's great news. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to refit either one of these two with the correct tab washer, and then I've got the old tin snips out because I'm going to actually shape that a little bit, because that's been made out of roughly the right gauge material. So I'm going to just tidy it up a little bit, and that'll be a useful spare and also a pattern. So I'll do that now and I'll bring you back. Okay, so there we are with the quadrant spring now fitted properly with its tab washer. I'm not going to bend the tabs now because obviously we're going to be taking this motor apart again for a full clean up prior to the final build. This is just the first fit, but that's gone well. The spring is clear of any other casting protrusions. This casting protrusion here and that hole is for the selector fork spindle that goes in that end. So what we'll do now then, we'll get this bearing out, we'll find this bearing so we can pop that in. The best way to drift that in is on the end of the actual lay shaft itself. That should be okay. You can see there's a groove around that hole, and that's for a thrust washer. There's a pin there which is already installed, and that's to stop the thrust washer spinning once it's in properly. So we'll put the thrust washer in first to make sure its pinhole is located properly, and then we'll drift in the bearing first, the needle roller bearing into here, and then before we fit the main shaft and lay shaft and selectors etc. as one unit, we'll put that thrust washer in, and we'll make sure it's located properly on its peg. Right, let's find that bearing. Okay, so there's the gearbox internals laid out. So we've got main shaft, clutch shaft, lay shaft, selectors on the selector spindle. We've got an open-ended needle roller bearing for the gearbox cover, and at the far end inside of the engine sprocket we've got a blind. That's a blind ended. These bearings are pretty readily available actually, because they were used on other models, so they're Torrington bearings. Then we've got the selector quadrant itself. We've got its mounting nut and circlip. This is top gear on the main shaft. So actually that goes into the big bearing on the left there and just slides in. There is a there it goes. There is an oil seal that we need to put in on the other side. That hasn't been done yet, I don't think, but we'll check that on the other side at some future point. And then obviously on the other side of that top gear that I put in that I didn't show you was that the sprocket screws in with its nuts, and we'll also need a locking washer, tab washer for that. But anyway, we're all laid out there. So what we'll do now is we'll get that lay shaft bearing in. Oh, one thing I haven't got is the thrust washer. So yeah, I'll dig the thrust washer out too. And there it is, there's the thrust washer with the hole for the pin to stop it spinning, but also you can see it's grooved as well, so oil does permeate it. But also you'll notice in here where it sits, there's a groove cast into the casing there, so oil flies down and can drop into the reverse side of that, well, both sides of that thrust washer too. I don't know why it would go in the reverse side, because it's going to be a static thrust washer hopefully anyway. But anyway, it does get fed oil by splash, so belts and braces approach, but probably worthwhile. Righty ho, needle roller bearing in place and seated, and also you can see now I've put the thrust bearing in as well, and I think I've found at least one initial problem that was causing the gearbox covers at this end not to seat properly, and that's because the lay shaft wasn't going all the way in, and that's because the thrust bearing wasn't sitting in its groove properly. The groove wasn't quite machined properly, so I've dressed it a little, and also one of the thrust bearings that I had was bent, it wasn't flat, but luckily I've got some spares, so that's now in. And of course, going back to this cast-in groove at the back here to feed oil splash, obviously that's down to the bearing at the back, not for that thrust washer which doesn't turn. It's for the bearing underneath, behind it, as you can see. So we're now ready then to put the cam plate in, not the quadrant as I said earlier, the cam plate itself, i.e. that piece. Let's get the screwdriver out of the way. And mustn't lose that clip. So this goes in like so, but as you can see it's a threaded hole, and it essentially turns, or its spindle on this end turns in this nut, and this nut threads into the crankcase, and the spindle on the end of this is grooved, as you can just see there, to accept that circlip, and that's what holds it into position rather than its weight being pressed down onto the selector fork nubs here, which fit into the grooves on the underside, like so. So we'll get that fitted, and what you do is you get it fitted and then it's pushed right up so it's touching the crankcase, and that gives you just enough space then to get the gearbox internals and those selector quadrants with their nubs in before you then push the cam plate down. So we'll put the cam plate in first. So that's the cam plate in, but loosely fitted, and as you can see, not all the way screwed down because we don't want to push it down too far yet, otherwise it's going to foul us getting the selector forks in. And what I forgot was that I have to remove top gear from the main shaft side of it, because that gets in the way because this is such a tight fit. But now that's in, we can replace top gear. It should slide in relatively easy when you get it lined up properly. I'm going to put it lined up straight. There she goes, with fingers so she's in. Right, that's everything in then, ready to accept the gear cluster, main shaft, lay shaft, selector spindles and the selectors themselves. So that goes in as one unit, so I'm going to use both hands here, so bear with me a sec and we'll get sorted. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, look at that. So managed to fit the main shaft, lay shaft, clusters, and then get the selectors lined up with the quadrant cam. Took quite a lot of work to do that, but managed to do it. As you can see, the nuts screwed right the way down, so the cam is all the way in on the inside. And I was going to show you that, but then I just thought, well, I'll just see how the outer cases fit now and see if we've got a gap, and look at that. No gaskets yet, and I've just put one Allen in and just not tightened it up, but offered it up, and everything goes home. Now, I'm sure the gearbox will be as tight as hell, but that's a million times better than it was because there was quite a gap there. So now things are beginning to seat properly. It's looking fairly promising. You can see from this angle actually some of the challenges that you've got with these motors. If you ever talk to anybody that's built these up, they went through obviously various stages and revisions during their prototype stages, and as you can see here, there's actually two probably incompatible parts. There's this outer cover, which I believe was a sand cast part, not die cast, before we got it machined and polished up. We've got a die cast inner there, but you can see that there's been modifications in between these two parts being manufactured. You can see there's actually a well, a casting anyway. I don't think it's drilled on the inside. We'll check when we cut the cover off for another screw there, but not on the outer side. However, we've got one here which we have sorted out, and all the rest are normal. Then that's a stud with a dome nut on the end of it, as is the case over here. So you can see some of the challenges that you have. These line up fine, but obviously there's a change at some point. I don't know which way around, whether that was later or whether that was later. I've got a feeling that was later. But then you've got that mounting point for the starter, which didn't change. Anyway, there we are. So let me just take these covers off and I'll show you what the inside of the gearbox does look like. I just couldn't resist putting these on. Okay everyone, there we are. That's the inside of the gearbox as it is at the moment. Position looks good. Selectors are all in. Gearbox does turn and does select gears. However, there is one slight problem in that the selector spindle is not going home all the way, because I don't think you'll be able to see this right at the back. You can't really see it, but right at the back there, the hole for the spindle doesn't line up at all. And those selectors are in the right place because they're all facing up to the cam plate correctly with their nubs. So that's going to need some re-drilling and a bit of finishing at the back there, because this spindle is sticking out far too much and it's not seated at the back at all in the casting. So that's something to do, but nothing major, and we'll address that when we come to it. So that's pretty good news. Next thing that we'll be focusing on is with respect to the gearbox covers, and that is that I don't think I'll be able to get this off with one hand now, but we've got the gear change mechanism and returns etc. to install in the outer cover, and then we can put a gear lever on and see if we can actually select gears as well. But anyway, got some progress done today. That's very good. Pleased with that. And we'll leave it at that for now. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. Tune in for the next episode when I say we'll continue with the gearbox. In the meantime, I might carry on and do a little bit on that starter motor, and just take the planetary gearbox off and see if we can get it to spin on the battery. But I'll leave it for now and see you again soon. Thanks again. Bye.